Thornton Road Studios and the West Tour, it's a really neat concept because we have photographers, we have clay, we have just about everything you could possibly imagine. Ceramics, mosaics. Studio L is a metal art studio, so it's a lot of three-dimensional pieces.
But we really try to make the studio look like a gallery. Back in my 20s, I learned how to do basket weaving, and so it's a takeoff of wild weave basketry. And what I'm doing is I'm taking recycled copper cable, and I heat it up with the torch until it can move freely and soft and annealed, and I untwist it, and I start weaving a metal cloth, and then pound it flat and braise it. So I'm actually end up with a big metal cloth, and I cut it out. I think of it almost like cutting out a dress. And that form, actually the big piece was like cutting out a pattern for a dress, and how do I create a curve and connect the pieces, and then I take all the overlaps out so it looks like one big piece. I started out as a jewelry maker. I'm seeing that my jewelry is starting to look like my sculpture and vice versa, and I like it. What I've been trying to do in my own studio and in the complex, I try to do every year, is add a new media so that it's exciting every time people come here.
I've done paintings for many years though. I was a graphic designer, and that's what I was trained to be. And I spent a lot of years behind computers, clicking and dragging a mouse, until at a certain point I just kind of had to realize, you know what, my whole life I've been trying to find a way to be an artist without really being an artist. Do something artistic without being a fine artist. And in the end, I realized I just need to make fine art and let it be that. The catalyst for that was having children and realizing I need to teach them to go for whatever the hell it is they want to go for, and go full force, be brave and don't be scared, and never quit. Don't give up on your dreams. Started out as a woman dealing with breast cancer, and I find that I'm kind of fascinated with their strength and that warrior mode that they get into. They're so proactive and they're so strong about it. And then as I started sculpting her, I felt a connection with her myself, and she was tough and strong and sexy at the same time. And by the time she was finished, I was like, wow, I want to be her. I want to be that. You know, she's just sort of every woman, and it could be anybody's battle and anybody's challenges that they have to get through, and that toughness that you have to have, and that tenacity and that confidence that you have to have. This sculpture started out with someone that's very close to me that went through a very difficult time, and none of us knew. But he was going through a really horrible time. He was this fun-loving, happy guy, got everything together, but behind the scenes, there was so much more going on, and we didn't find out until it was too late. So the idea was that there's a lot more going on inside of us. So I had to create a sculpture and then put it in an environment, because at that point, our feelings and our emotions, we keep inside in this beautiful little protected place. And that's what this piece is about. The thought was, maybe what's going on inside of us isn't so ugly, and maybe it's really kind of beautiful.
Well, I like working in bronze. In the past, I've done more where I've actually was working off of images in a traditional bonsai book. So I would get ideas for shapes of trees, then I would go look at the rocks that I had and figure out what shape of tree I want to put on the rock. But then a friend of mine asked me to make him a windswept tree, like something he saw in the desert. And so that's where one of my other pieces came from, which got me to go online and looking at more images of more just natural things out in nature instead of things that have been manipulated by man, like a bonsai. So sometimes I start with a rock that inspires me and figure out what shape. Sometimes it starts with a tree that I'm inspired by, and then I look for the right rock. Well, I found these septarian nodules at a gem and mineral show, and I love the crystals and the roughness, and to me it just looked like terrain, natural terrain for trees to be growing on. So for the type of work I do, it was perfect. So this rock in particular, it just made me think of trips I took out to Colorado when I was a kid. And that's the first time I saw aspen trees that are very tall and narrow like this. So that's what this rock spoke to me. I just thought, I want to do some aspen trees. And then aspens, as compared to some of my other trees, before I was working in more of a bonsai style, and so you had much more large limbs coming off of the trunk. So this was very different for me and much more time consuming than I expected. But I think the finished piece was worth the effort.
It's copper and then done with different types of acids to make the different patinas, the different colors. A little bit of ink, sometimes mixed with the acids to make them pop more. A little bit of more reds and stuff like that you can't really get with copper. And then it's covered in a clear coat enamel and sealed in, cut with acetylene torches. It's a lot of fun. I actually apprenticed under my dad for about 7 years beforehand. He did it for about 35 years. And he always said it's about 70% knowing what you're doing, and 30% it's weather and humidity and just luck. That one, it was right after my dad passed away. And he always wanted to make a gears piece. And on this one, this piece right here, it's basically the copper, and then I placed steel gears over it and poured the acids on top of it, and it left the impressions of gears. And then different types of things I placed on top of it to make the different lines and things like that with different acids. And then, yeah, basically sealed it up.